So let me tell you about the disadvantages of Sauce Labs. There aren't many, but just with everything, there are disadvantages, and I do want to be honest and straightforward with you so that you do understand them up front. So the very first disadvantage, and this one is the most important to no one in my point of view, is that the tests that you run on your local environment will actually take a longer time to execute than they do in your local environment in Sauce Labs. So Sauce tests run slower than local tests. Slower. And in my experience, I've found that they can be slower anywhere between 50 to 100%. Now, that's for tests that are running about for a minute. For a minute long test, they'll run anywhere between 50 to 100%. Now, obviously that's not going to be the case if your test runs longer than 30 minutes, and I'll explain to you why in a second. But what does this mean for you? This means for you that, for example, if you have a suite of automated tests, let's say you have 3 test cases here. You have 3 test cases in a suite. This box represents a suite. And you're trying to execute them locally on your machine. If you would like to run these tests locally on your machine, what you have to do is run one test at a time. So let me do local here, Sauce. Okay? So if you're running these tests locally, what's actually going to happen is you're going to run for one test. That's going to be 1 minute. We're all going to assume that all of these tests are taking 1 minute. Then you're going to execute test number 2, which will be 1 minute once this first test finishes. And then this will be test number 3 that's going to run as soon as test number 2 finishes. So you can't start one test until you finish the next, right? Because you can only run a single test at a time, unless you have parallelization turned on, but we're not assuming that for a second. So at the end of the day, what that means is your entire test suite runtime will be 3 minutes long, locally. Now in Sauce Labs, however, if you're running the same sequence, each of these tests is going to take 2 minutes, up to 100%. So let's say they're taking the maximum amount of time, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. However, because Sauce Labs allows you to run in parallel, you can turn on parallelization. And so rather than executing each of these tests in sequence, you can execute them all at the same time. So this is when the tests are running. So at the end of the day, these 3 tests will actually run in 2 minutes versus the 3 minutes that you needed here for your local environment. So what does that mean for you? It means for you that because of this disadvantage, you're going to require at least 3 virtual machines from Sauce Labs if you're looking to speed up your suite execution time. If your suite has hundreds or thousands of tests, for example, we have thousands of tests, functional automated tests that are running, thousands of minutes of execution time is not acceptable at all. And so we want to speed things up. And so whenever you want to speed things up, at some point you get to such a level where the only way to speed things up is to begin running tests in parallel, right? Parallelization is so cheap now, you just throw more hardware at it and you run as many tests as you want in parallel and decrease that time. However, you'll need at least 3 virtual machines in order for you to make it worth it, right? So that we can run 3 tests at the same time versus what we can do. If you got 2 virtual machines, this won't work because you're going to execute these 3 tests and it'll take 3 minutes. But if you got 2 virtual machines and you run these tests in parallel, you'll run 2 tests in 2 minutes, but then after that you'll still need to execute another test. which will take another minute, and so then it'll be a total of 3 minutes anyway, because you had to execute in 2 batches versus a single batch that can handle your entire test suite. So that's the main disadvantage. So you may be asking now, well, why is that? Why is it that the tests run slower in the Sauce Labs cloud than they do in our local environment? Well, let me explain to you, and I think once I do, you will definitely understand why that is the case. So locally, if you're running your tests, let's pretend that this right here is your CI environment. So this is your CI server that you've been running your tests on. If you want to run those tests, it's very easy, right? All you do is they run on the CI server, they pull up a browser. Let's make this a browser, call it Firefox. And then they run your test, and then they communicate back with that local resource. There's very little, the time here required for this communication is very low. If you think the way Sauce Labs works is you got your CI server. The CI server, through the remote WebDriver, now has to talk to the hub. The hub may not be located where you are. You may live in Australia. The Sauce Labs hub may be in California. Just that internet travel time, right? The law of physics. It takes some time. You can't decrease that time. So regardless of that and the speed of internet, there's a period of time required for that. So there's some time here. Okay? Then once it even gets to the hub, there's more processing that happens. So whenever it gets to the hub, Sauce Labs has to read one of your config files or even in the source code, and then it has to figure out which virtual machine you would like to spin up. And so Sauce Labs goes out, spins up a virtual machine for you, a brand new clean virtual machine. And so now you can run your tests. This process is pretty fast. Maybe takes 15, 20 seconds. I'm not 100% sure on the time. It's fast, but again, it takes some more time. Let's say it takes 15 seconds. So now you've just added 15 extra seconds to your test time. Now, once all this happens, afterwards, the test still has to communicate to the hub, and these may not even be located in the same data center. I don't know, I didn't set up Sauce Labs, but they might not be. And so that will take time. And then talking back to your CI server will also take more time. So this whole transition adds about 50 to 100% more execution time in order for your test to execute. And so that's how that works, and that's why that happens, and that's why the tests are slower. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking to improve your test suite execution time, you want to cut it by 50%, you want to cut it by 100%, you'll need many more VMs than you think. It's not a one-to-one, okay? It's 50 to 100% slower for a minute test. Now, before I've mentioned, it's for a minute-long test. It's not for something like 30-minute long test. Why is that? Well, because if your test is already taking 30 minutes, then this amount of time that's required is going to be much smaller percentage than your test. This may be, let's say it's a maximum of 1 minute. If we're assuming it's 100%, then if this takes 1 minute and your test takes 30 minutes to run, you don't need to do any extra cycles here. So it's going to be 31-minute long test versus 30 minutes, and so that time is negligible, but you should never be having a 30-minute test running. That's a huge mistake. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong. You're not doing something right with test automation, especially GUI test automation. So keep it to a minimum or to a maximum of 1 minute long. But that's a totally different subject. But anyways, so the second disadvantage of Sauce Labs is that it's not free, unfortunately. Such a fantastic service cannot be free. Well, maybe it can in the future, but not right now. And it does cost money. So In my point of view, this is not that big of a problem. The amount of money that it costs for you to run your own Sauce Labs grid is minuscule to the amount of time that you would waste maintaining your own Selenium grid. There are many managers, many bosses above you, if you want to set up your Sauce Labs grid, that just don't understand the benefits. Let me explain to you the benefits of using something like Sauce Labs. If you want to maintain your own grid, let's say you can maintain 10 nodes. You're one engineer trying to maintain 10 nodes that have different operating systems and virtual machines and your own hub locally. Maintaining those 10 nodes will cost you at least 15% of your time. You've got to maintain the browsers, you've got to maintain the operating systems, you've got to update the operating systems, you've got to update the browsers, you've got to make sure certain browsers don't get updated, you've got to write scripts to clean stuff up. It's going to be at least 15% of your time. If that engineer is making about $100,000 a year, which is again on the low end, I'm keeping everything on the low end just to see how even the low end scenario will work out. That means that it's costing the company $15,000 per year to maintain your grid. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that there's opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost that the engineers missing out on is that they can't automate more tests. They can't improve application coverage for testing. So it's going to decrease test coverage. Because rather than doing more test automation, helping to decrease the gap of coverage, they're working on maintaining the Selenium grid. And so that again is obviously worth a lot of money, and depending on your application and how many users you have, this could be worth a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions per year. So Sauce Labs, they do have their pricing online. The enterprise pricing, they ask you to call it, but I can say that it's definitely less than this per year to maintain a grid of about 10 virtual machines, and you get enough minutes to execute your automated tests that you don't have to worry about anything, and they will maintain the whole grid for you. They have probably hundreds of browser OS combinations. You can run on mobile like iOS and Android. You can run on mobile emulators, and you can run on any operating system and browser that you want. And they maintain all of that for you. They store all those records, and you get all the logging and the video capture and the screenshot capture out of the box. So this is not really a disadvantage for me. This totally negligible. I would always get Sauce Labs over maintaining my own Selenium grid, but I just wanted to make you aware. See you in the next video.